Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, December the 17th, 2020. It is currently 10:15 a.m. Central Time, and you know where I'm at, right? You can tell me. Yes, I'm currently here at Victory Baptist Church, located in Ovalo, Texas. I know some of you right now, depending on where you're listening, I know some of you are listening from areas where you're getting a lot of snow. My daughter lives in Boston. She sent me a video this morning of snow, and I'm like, okay, wonderful. But for me, it's going to be like 65 degrees here in West Texas because I live in a good place. And if you live in a place where there's snow falling, you live in a very bad place. You live in a very evil place. You probably should repent and move here so that you, could come to this church, right? And you could support this church. That's what you should do, really. That snow is a sign. It's telling you something. It's telling you to run. It's telling you to flee. It's telling you to not stay there. I am, from my perspective, I don't understand how the early settlers were moving along, right? That they were moving along to settle in a new area. Well, as soon as I was, I had my horses and my wagon and I had all my stuff in my wagon. I'm like, okay, we're going to settle right here, right? And we stop and we start building. As soon as snow started falling, I would be like, okay, that's a sign. Pack everything up, tear everything down, put it back in the wagon. Let's keep going until this white stuff stops falling, because as long as this white stuff starts falling, as long as this stuff is falling and it doesn't stop, well, we know that we should not live here. That's the sign. That's you should just keep going until it's sunny and warm, not where it's cold and snow is falling, because that's no place to live. That's not good. No, you should continue moving, right? I don't understand. Like, what was the mindset? Hey, let's settle right here. Oh, this is a beautiful spot. Oh, wait, it's 20 below zero. The wind is blowing 300 miles an hour. And when I go outside, my fingers fall off and I can't feel my face. Let's just stay right here. No, that's a sign that you need to move. That's a sign you need to not stay there. All right. So you can try to explain it to me. I know I'll get emails going, I love it. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful when you're sitting inside, and the minute you walk out that door and then that cold hits your face and you get hypothermia, you can't. No, it can kill you. That's not wonderful. No. When you go outside, and you can only be out there for so long before you start losing parts of your body because of, no, that's a sign that you should not be there. All of your arguments to justify it are flawed. They make absolutely no sense. So, and trust me, you say, well, you live in Texas, you don't understand. Oh no, I do understand, because the United States military sent me to Omaha, Nebraska for 10 years. And the first time it snowed, I was like, oh, this is awesome for about 5 seconds. And then when I'm like, wait, I got to go out in this stuff. Wait, we're not going to shut everything down. We're not going to cancel everything. I got to go out. I got to go to work. Then I was like, no. And then I had to go outside and start the car and then try to get the snow and the ice off the windshield. And I'm like, no, this is not right. I tried to call and say, look, this is against my basic human rights. Telling me to get out in this stuff, it's not fair. It's not right. It's evil. It has to be a violation of the Geneva Convention. It has to be a violation of basic human rights. We should not have to get out in this kind of horrible weather. And then it's a long story how I ended up here, but I ended up in Saarbrücken, Germany. I won't even tell you how I ended up there. It was I wasn't supposed to be there, but I ended up there. And, we set up what's called a turnkey facility because this was all during Desert Storm. Troops that were injured or wounded or needed severe, more critical, higher level medical care would be sent to our facility from the front lines, because you can only do so much in the front lines. And then they would be sent to our facility in Saarbrücken, Germany, where we could do surgical procedures, more extensive, medical procedures in order to preserve life and whatever else needed to be done. Okay, you get the idea. So we end up there. So it's weird. The military base we stayed on was miles away from the actual hospital that we set up. The hospital was like in downtown Swabrucken. And so we had to take these like buses down there. Well, we end up there and this big winter storm comes in, crazy winter storm. And we get basically trapped in the hospital. We cannot get out of the hospital. We can't leave. Right. And I remember there was like a World War II ambulance. That thing was like an antique. And we thought that we could use this ambulance to get us back to where we stayed. We could be back in our rooms and, instead of just sitting in a hospital trapped. And we tried. And we got it out of the garage. We got it running and we started up where the hospital was. There was this big hill and we would get like halfway up the hill and then come sliding back down. We tried like multiple times until we thought we were going to end up flipping the ambulance and killing ourselves. And yeah, it wasn't going to work. So we ended up being trapped there, I think for 2 days. I think we were there for 2 days, maybe 3 days. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But see, that's a sign. See, snow, winter, it's nothing good. No, bad. So for those who are experiencing that, I apologize for what you're going through. But I'm going to enjoy the 64, 65 degree weather here in West Texas because, again, I made the right decision. You made the wrong decision. I made the only logical decision. Okay, now I'm just joking around. But yeah, wherever you are, hopefully you're safe. Be careful. And not just because of the weather, because of the COVID situation and all the other situations happening in our world. Be safe, be careful, and thank you for tuning in. But we've got more important things to talk about this morning, all right? And I say all of that for a reason. There's an ultimate reason why I just kind of joke around and say all of that. And you'll understand it in a minute, okay? Because what I was just doing right there is what happens in podcast, right? In podcast, people share information. They share experiences. They share information. They share philosophies. And so there I gave you some information. It's going to be 60-something degrees here in West Texas. There is a big snowstorm in certain parts of the country right now, like my daughter's living in Boston. There's information. I gave you my philosophy, right? I gave you a philosophy about my view of cold weather, that you should not be in it. And I don't understand why the early settlers stopped and said, we're going to stay here. And when it started snowing, they should have moved. I'm joking around, but I'm giving you information. I'm giving you philosophy. I'm giving you my philosophy about weather. I'm throwing out a little humor. Podcast and gives you all this kinds of thing. It gives you opinions. It gives you philosophies. It gives you information. And there are millions of them out there. And we're going to talk about podcast. And we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about my podcast list, the podcast I listen to, and we're going to talk about my philosophy when it comes to information, all right? Because I think there is a broken philosophy that is entered into the consciousness of Americans, and I think, and maybe people around the world, but especially here in America, and I think we need to do some correcting of this philosophy. We need to purge it. We need to purify it because it's clearly broken. And this philosophy, you may know it as, well, it comes, you know it from a little 2-word slogan, fake news. Fake news. And there is an inherent broken logic and philosophy with that term, and I will explain it to you in just a minute. But why are we going to talk about all of these things? Why are we going to talk about all of these things? Well, here's the reason why. Yesterday, while I was on the air, I received an email while I was on the air, and I know some of you have emailed me, and I've not responded to some of your emails. I apologize. Things have been a little hectic this week. Typically, I try to respond quickly, so if I haven't emailed you back, I apologize. I'm not ignoring you. Just I'll get to it as soon as I can. All right. But here we go. This was sent at 1 p.m. yesterday, so I'm almost positive I was live on the air at the time. And it says this: Hey, Trevor, I hope you and your family are well and that your daughter is handling COVID well. Thank you very much for your thoughts and asking the question. She was doing really, really, really bad last night. Hopefully she's doing better today. I have not received an update at the time of leaving to come here to do this live broadcast. So thank you for asking. I just had a quick question. What podcast would you recommend listening to? I don't know who to trust these days, and I think your opinion could help. I feel the same way as you when it comes to being a Christian right now. It's honestly embarrassing. I try to keep my head down and keep moving forward, but it's hard. I feel like the only one around me, or the only one around my area that feels how I do. I'm very thankful for what you do because I would be completely alone in feeling this way. Keep it up. Well, that last part, I hate that you feel that way. I feel that way. I don't even feel, when it comes to Christianity right now, I feel like I'm completely an outsider and that I don't even belong. I feel like that, and I know that other Christians would say that that was not their intention, but I feel like that unless, I'm pro-Trump, I'm pro the election was stolen and COVID is a hoax, I feel like that if I don't follow that doctrine, like Trump is our savior, basically. I know they wouldn't use those words, but basically Trump is our savior, the election was stolen, and COVID is a hoax. If I don't follow that creed, then I'm not really welcomed. I'm not really accepted, or my salvation is called into question. That is a sad place to be right now. And we could go with a number of other issues going on within Christianity right now that just makes it really sad and embarrassing. But he asked about what podcasts I listen to. So when he asked that, I was like, okay, so I wonder what kind of podcast he's referring to. So I responded, and I basically, like, what kind of podcast are you asking about? And he responded with this: theology and news. All right, theology and news. Okay, that gives me a little idea of what he's looking for. He says this: theology and news. I know most Christian news sites today are basically Republican propaganda wrapped in Christian language. That's a very good way to put it, yes. And that is true. A lot of Christian news sites today are nothing more than Republican propaganda wrapped in Christian language. And if you can't see that as a Christian, I feel bad for you. You need to see that that's what's happened. A lot of your Christian news is simply Republican propaganda wrapped in religious language. And you should be bothered by that because you're being manipulated and that's not a good thing. He goes on, we really need to get a name for this fake Christianity we have now, and we should know what's going on around the world. I would just like to have it in a Christian worldview, and I need to know more about theology. And then in my discussion about Beth Moore and the podcast episode that I did yesterday about Beth Moore, I mentioned a pastor by the name of Greg, and his name is spelled Locké. I pronounced it Locky. I was wrong. It's pronounced Locke. So thank you very much to this person emailing me. I apologize for getting that wrong, but I'm famous for getting names wrong. You should have seen me in the medical world for 22 years, walking to the waiting area going, Mr. Yeah, you, Mrs. Yeah, or using their rank, a sergeant, colonel. And yeah, I would always get the names wrong. And some people would get greatly offended. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I did the best I could. So I could care less if you get my name wrong. I could care less. I've been called Trevor. I've been called all. Who cares? To me, a name is irrelevant. But some people, I understand, they get greatly offended by it. But okay, so I apologize to Pastor Greg Locke for mispronouncing your name. He goes on to say that this person, and he gives me a video of this person. At some point, I'll watch it. I haven't watched it yet because he says sorry in advance. But yeah, this person who is basically going after Beth Moore is someone who, he basically says COVID is not a pandemic. He's against masks. He's against the vaccine. He won't take it. His followers won't either. He's a massive Trump supporter. He says the elections were stolen. I mean, basically, and then he attacks Beth Moore for saying Christian nationalism is a threat to the church. Well, obviously you're going to attack her because you're right in the Christian nationalist camp. You're right there in that whole Trumpism camp. So obviously you're going to attack her. And he attacked her not on the basis of not on the substance of her argument. He just basically was condescending and attacked her personally. So, all right. So when I got this, I'm like, you know what? I could email this person back and try to give them a list of all of my podcasts, but it really would not articulate my philosophy. It would not really give you my perspective. So I'm going to try to offer first kind of my philosophy here, And then I'm going to go through a very extensive list of what I listen to. And I'm going to try to articulate why I choose to listen to these things. Okay. So here we go. If you want to make a list, this is the time you need to start writing things down. This is going to be a long list, but first let me just offer my philosophy. Here is my philosophy. The first thing I want to do, is I want to correct this fake news idea. And here's the reason I want to correct it. Okay. And I'm not saying this emailer was doing that, but a lot of people who use the term fake news, it really, really bothers me. And because if you really think about the way this term became very mainstream, I mean, it's been used in a lot of different ways, but one of the major ways it was used, President Trump would use it a lot. Fake news, fake news, fake news. And basically any news that he didn't like was labeled fake news. And this way of thinking becomes very dangerous because this is what happens. Any information you hear that you don't like or any information that goes against your way of thinking, you just label it fake news. Okay, well, so that means you become the one who determines truth. Like you become the sole decider of what's real news and fake news. I don't like that. It's fake. Well, wait. How do you know it's fake? Well, you've got to first, before you can label something fake, you have to first prove that it is fake or you're basically making a false accusation. You're bearing false witness. You're accusing people of giving you fake news and you don't feel it necessary to clearly prove or demonstrate that it's fake. And typically when I push back on that, this is what people do. They then will send me a link to some podcast, some YouTube video saying, see, that news was fake because this video gives a different perspective. Whoa, slow down. Okay, no, wait a minute. If, let's say, CNN, MSNBC, NPR, whomever, that's fake news, well then, how do you know if mainstream news is fake, then why does the quote-unquote alternative news sites, that YouTube video you found, that Facebook post you're reading, whatever, what makes it real news? Right, like that. Okay, so I saw a report on CNN. That's fake news because this podcast, this YouTube video, they gave me a different perspective. They're real news. Well, wait a minute. Well, why don't you have the same level of skepticism about the quote unquote alternative news sites, the counter news sites? What makes them true? What makes them right? Oh, they're right and they're true because you agree with them. Truth is not determined by your agreement with it. You don't determine which news is true and which news is fake based off your agreement with it, because that just makes you the one determining truth. So guess what happens? You start adopting the philosophy in Judges where you're doing what is right in your own eyes. You're going to now what is right is whatever you think is right. So, hey, I saw a report here. They claim this many people died in the pandemic. That's fake news because this podcast over here told me that it's fake. Well, what makes them right? What makes them legitimate? Like, you've got to see the broken logic in that. You can't label something fake until first you can demonstrate that it's fake. And you can't, your proof for it being fake is simply another news, quote unquote, news site, alternative news site. I'll use the term alternative news site. No, in other words, not a mainstream news site. They're like Alex Jones. That's true. CNN. That's fake. Well, wait, why? Like you've got to demonstrate. You've got to be able to prove it. It's like people think they may report that Trump lost the election, but I know that that's not true. Why? Because I saw this video on YouTube and they told me that Trump did not lose the election. Well, what makes their information correct? I don't know how people keep falling for this. If you don't like it, it's fake. And if you do, it's true. This philosophy is ultimately to me a fruit of relativism, where truth is what you determine it to be. Remember how Christians used to be against relativism and we condemned relativism, but we said, no, there's absolute truth and yours doesn't mean it's true for everyone. No, you don't determine truth. Remember, we argued about this forever as Christians? Well, then somehow this fake news thing, we've adopted the philosophy of relativism. Well, I don't believe that news is true. It's fake. So it's fake news. But that doesn't work. So that's we've got to fix that philosophy. All right. So that's number one. Number two, that's the first part of my philosophy. We've got to fix this whole fake news concept. We've got to fix it because it's so just weird. Like, hey, that's fake news. Look at this. This is real news. Well, why do you know that's real news? Why? Well, how do you? It's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's almost like I'm living in a Twilight Zone. I know it's a dated reference. Well, they did do a new version of Twilight Zone for CBS All Access. So maybe it's not as dated, but okay, I'm living in a alternative reality when I start talking to people and I feel like I've been swept in, pulled into some alternative reality where truth is determined by the individual. And I refuse to live in a world where each individual just determines now what is true. And there's no truth, there's no absolute truth, and there's no standard to try to even determine what truth is. That's a dangerous place to be. And that's kind of where we are. And Christians are the ones who have to stand against it. We've got to say, no. There are facts. There is truth, and we've got to determine that. Okay, all right. Wow, I just got a bunch of notifications on my iPad. Someone doesn't like what I'm saying. Okay, calm down. It'll be okay. All right, so just give me a few minutes to try to continue. All right. So there's philosophy number one. We've got to be careful what we leave. We have to have how can I state it? We have to have an actual reason for labeling something fake news. All right. So that's number one. Number two, we should seek information from every perspective we can find. This is how, like, if you're going to try to navigate the world today, you have to be you have to be like a treasure hunter. You have to be an information hunter, right? You have to be on the hunt for information from every perspective. Like, I don't care about just getting it from a Christian worldview, right? I want perspectives from every walk of life because I've got to take all of this information in and then I have to try to think about it, process it, and try to figure out. And then this is what you need. We'll use that for number three. So number one, we got to fix this fake news attack and realize we have to have a legitimate reason for labeling something fake news other than just our disagreement with it. And if we're going to label it that, we've got to prove it. Number two, we've got to be information hunters. We've got to search out all information. I don't care what perspective it comes from. And when you see my list of podcasts, you're going to see that that's what I do. I get information from here. I get information from here, from everywhere. And I bring it all together. So just seek out information from every perspective possible. Don't be afraid of information or opinion, right? Because again, in a podcast, guess what? I demonstrated it at the beginning. I gave you some information, right? What was the information? I gave you what the temperature is going to be here in West Texas. It's going to be in the 60s today, 62, 63, 64. I don't know. They've changed it multiple times this morning. Somewhere in the 60s. It is true that in certain parts of the United States today, I think maybe it happened yesterday, maybe it's going on today. I'd have to look at the forecast. There was a big snowstorm coming. They were predicting some major amounts of snow. I think I saw a report this morning that 3 people have already died, which is horrible. And my daughter sent me video. That's all information. Then I left the information, and then guess what I started giving you? I gave you an opinion. I gave you a philosophy. I have an opinion and a philosophy about cold weather. Flee from it. Run from it. Don't live in it. Get away from it. Like if I live in an area where it's freezing cold, move. Go move to an area where it's not freezing cold. Who wants to deal with that? All right. That's an opinion. That's an opinion. Now you could listen to a different podcast, gives you the same information, right? Hey, I saw that in Texas today, it's going to be in the 60s. That's ridiculous. It's December. We should want snow. Now they're giving you an opinion, right? So get all the information you can, right? And get information that also offers all kinds of different opinions and perspectives, right? You want to be an information hunter. Information And listen, you want to get it from all the different perspectives and opinions you can. Because listen, if all you listen to is what agrees with you, you never have the potential to be challenged or to grow or have your perspective challenged. Look, if all you listen to is what already agrees with you, then you're going to live in a never-ending cycle of thinking you're right. You could be wrong. And the only way you could possibly ever think you're wrong is when you hear something that differs with you. You hear something that counters the way you think. You've got to be willing to embrace. I know we make a joke in 2020 about, people wanting a safe zone, where they can go into a zone where they won't have to hear anything that's offensive or anything that contradicts them. That's it. And I know social media is what led to this mindset, right? You're on social media, and then someone starts posting a lot of nonsense you don't like. And so what you unfriend them, you block them, you mute them because you're tired of seeing their information. I understand that, but it leads to a philosophy of I only want the information I agree with. I don't want to hear any other perspective. I want to hear and basically it just becomes this cycle where what you think, you only listen to what confirms what you think. Therefore, you grow in that confirmation bias that you are right. You don't want that. You've got to hear different. You want information from every perspective. You want different opinions. You've got to hunt it out. You've got to seek it out. And in 2020, the good thing is it's available to you. Now, it's also easy for you to just block everything you don't want to see. It's easy for you to just create a list that only gives you your perspective. You can't do that. You'll never grow. You could be wrong in a perspective. You got to hear the alternative perspective. You've got to hear it. And that's why I try so hard. As a podcaster whose primary audience are professing Christians. That's why I've always tried my best to challenge the majority way Christians think. I try to always offer a different perspective because Christians need to be challenged. You can't just let everyone go, you're right, we're right, we're all... No, we've got to look at our own selves and realize our own flawed ways of thinking and be challenged about them. And guess what? Christians don't like that, so they just don't listen to me. And they go listen to the podcast that they already agree with. Well, wow. What a challenging experience. I think a certain way. I listen to people who think the way I think. Therefore, they're right, I'm right, we're right. And anyone else out there, they're wrong. And then here's what's dangerous. Anyone else who doesn't think the way we think, they're fake news. They're liars. They're deceived. They're of Satan. They're blinded. They're demon possessed. Okay. Whoa. You see how frightening that is? No. Hunt, seek information, different perspectives, okay? So, number one, don't label something fake news simply because you disagree. You've got to have an actual provable reason why you're calling it fake news. Number two, be an information hunter. I'll call it an information and opinion hunter. You want to hear as many different information, as much information as possible from as many different opinions and perspectives as possible. So we'll call it an information perspective hunter. That's a good way of putting it. Seek out information from different perspectives, right? Next, once you get all that information, once you get all those perspectives, it's your job to think about it, to process it, to meditate on it, to research it, to think it out, to discuss it so that your ultimate desire is truth. Your ultimate desire is not for your side. The only side you should have is the side of truth. Then you try to pursue what truth is. All right. So be careful don't label something fake until you can prove it's fake. Number two, seek out information and perspective. And number three, it's your job to process, to research, and to find out what is true. And sometimes that requires a lot of time and effort. All right. Now there's more I could say, but that's my approach. That is my approach. Okay. Everybody got that? Now, let's go through my list, my podcast list. It is extensive. I'm not even going to be able to go through all the podcasts I listen to. in this episode. I'm not even going to come close. It would probably take an hour, and I know you think I'm exaggerating, but I am not. I subscribe. Probably my podcast list is probably close to 1,000. It is insane. But there is a method to my madness, all right? So I started writing down some this morning in a notebook. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through this. All right, there's my pencil dropping. All right, here we go. This is how I start my morning. This is my morning when I wake up. Typically, sometimes sometimes I stay up throughout the night a lot. I mean, I don't sleep a lot, but if I do fall asleep, if I wake up, 4 or 5 in the morning, because I don't like to sleep. I hate sleep. That's a whole different philosophy. I hate sleep. Okay, but if it's 4, 5, 6 in the morning, and I will immediately grab my iPad and I start going through these podcasts. Are you ready? Start here from ABC News. Start here. It's an early morning podcast where they start kind of telling you, here's where you need to start. Here's going to be the stories of the day. Here are the stories you need to look at. Here's the stories you need to think about. All right, start here. And that one's usually about 15, 20 minutes. I immediately go to Up First from NPR News. Right? Start here, ABC News. Start here. That's what it's called. Then Up First from NPR News. Now, I know what someone's going to say, but those are liberal sources. They're sources of information. Now, and it's your job to be able to distinguish between information and opinion. They did a study, and it was frightening. They gave people some newspapers, and they had them read it, and tried to have the people determine what part of the news article was information, and what part of the news article had what we'll call opinion. All right. Or you could call it this way. What part of the article contained information? What part of the article contained interpretation, where they interpret that information? I can't remember the statistics right now in front of me, but it was well over 50% of the people were unable to distinguish the two. That is frightening. That is frightening. When I start listening to Start Here or Up First from NPR News, I start there because they're early morning podcasts that giving me an overview of what the big stories of the day are. Now, if I hear, I just try to get the information. Okay, that story, these are big stories to look at. I don't draw a conclusion immediately. And if they offer an opinion, if I hear an opinion, I know that's just an opinion. That's their interpretation. And I set it aside, and I may have to go then seek out the actual information for myself. If they cite a study, if they cite a document, if they say the Supreme Court gave a decision, I may have to go look at a more extensive documentation of what the Supreme Court said or what a judge said or a document that was released, whatever the case may be. I may have to go get broader context because they told me this is happening, and then they may give an opinion about it. But this gives me a good start of information. So Start Here from ABC News, Up First from NPR News. Then I go to The World and Everything in It. The World and Everything in It. I highly recommend The World and Everything in It. In fact, let me see here. I don't have this pulled up. I could grab a file and try to pull it over to the studio, but I won't do that. I'll just do this really quick. See, The World and Everything in It. Yeah, The World and Everything in It. You can pull this up on any podcast app. I just pulled it up from the website. The World and Everything in It. Here is yes. This is usually available. Usually it's available relatively early in the morning. Usually it's relatively available in the morning. This is what it sounds like.
The World and Everything in It is made possible by people like us. I'm Andrew Bells, and I work in development at World. What an honor to be part of a movement of readers, listeners, and viewers who band together to make something good. So many of you have already given to our December giving drive. Thank you. If you haven't yet participated, please visit wng.org/donate to join the tide of salt and light that goes out every day from World. I know you'll enjoy today's program.
Good morning. People are fleeing blue states in record numbers. That'll affect representation in Congress big time.
They're tired of the high tax rates, the restrictions and so forth that those states impose, and the high cost of living.
Also, Brexit. The drama drags on, but the end is finally in sight. Plus, a Mississippi church that shows the Christmas story to families driving by.
We hear them reading. The parents are reading this.
All right, so there's the world and everything in it. If you don't know anything about the world and everything in it, and the reason I'm spending more time with this one is this is probably a little bit more unknown. It shouldn't be unknown, but it is. The World and Everything in It is an Apple Podcasts top 100 news program delivering essential headlines, field reporting, interviews, and expert analysis every weekday. Hear original coverage such as weekly overview of every Supreme Court case, biblical, cultural analysis, and key international stories. So the reason I recommend this, and so I go from ABC News to Start Here, Up First by NPR News, and then I go to The World and Everything in It, which offers a somewhat of a Christian perspective. Now, sometimes they cover stories you're like, so you're going to talk about a Tennessee church telling the Christmas story as people drive by? Okay. Maybe it's interesting, maybe not. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I would really waste time on that. But again, it's letting me know things that are going on, and I'm getting information there. So, but they do every week cover every Supreme Court case, which is very good because it tells me what's going on with the Supreme Court. So that is, there's three. This is all the way I start my day. Start Here, Up First, and The World and Everything in It. All right. Then I move to This Morning with Gordon Deal, D-E-A-L. This Morning with Gordon Deal, D-E-A-L. All right. This Morning with Gordon Deal. Another morning. Again, these are how I start my day. And usually Start Here, Up First, and This Morning with Gordon Deal. Usually they're available by 7 a.m. Usually they're all available by 7 a.m. Even The World and Everything in It is usually available by 7 a.m. as well. Sometimes they're a little late, but those I usually are right there in the morning. And you know, while I'm getting ready, boom, I hit play. If I go to get breakfast, I just keep these playing really quick because I'm just trying to get a quick overview of what's going on in the world today. What do I need to be thinking about? Maybe what do I need to be praying about? What's happening? All right. So Start Here. ABC News, Up First, NPR, The World and Everything in It, This Morning with Gordon Deal, and then Morning Edition by NPR. Now, Morning Edition by NPR is usually not available to a little later, but so maybe that's a little later in the morning. I'll go through usually I don't have it. Most of my podcast apps are on my iPad Pro, which is at the house. Usually they list individual stories. So like that one will be like, 12 small episodes. That's the way I would call them. And that'll be like 3 minutes long, 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long. And I can just look through that list. Now, if I don't have time, I may not be able to listen to everything, but I can go, oh, that's an interesting story. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, wait, they talked about that on Start Here. They talked about that on Up First, or they talked about that on This Morning with Gordon Deal, or they talked about that on The World and Everything in It. Let me hear another, a more detailed report on it, and then I'll listen to what they have to say. That's Morning Edition with from NPR. All right, so there we have it. Start Here, ABC News, Up First by NPR, The World and Everything in It, Morning Edition NPR, and This Morning with Gordon Deal. All right. There you have it. Now, that's morning time. That usually gets my day going. Then throughout the day, here's a whole list of things that I will at least look to. Africa Today from BBC. Africa Today from BBC. I like to know what's happening, in Africa. I think it's good to at least have that perspective. And they kind of just cover in that whole part of the world what's going on. Now, again, it's relatively short. Now, sometimes I'll just start listening. And usually at the very beginning, they'll give you a basic overview, and I'll be like, oh, okay. In fact, let me just let you hear what Africa Today sounds like. Again, I'm just pulling these up from an iPad, so I apologize of the sound quality. But just so that you know, because this one a lot of people don't know, and I don't know why, but then when things are happening in that parts of the world, all of a sudden everyone in America acts like they're an expert, even though they don't keep up with what's happening in that part of the world. drives me absolutely crazy. If you want to pretend to be an expert, then do the research required to be an expert. If you're not going to do the research, then maybe you should just be silent on a topic, okay? But here we go. Africa Today sounds like this, all right? Yeah, and they're sometimes a little bit behind, but here's what it sounds like.
Hello and welcome to this podcast from the BBC World Service. Please let us know what you think and tell other people about us on social media. Podcasts from the BBC World Service are supported by advertising.
This holiday season,
Hang on. We got to give us a commercial. So give it a second. We'll let the commercial get by. Okay. They're messing up my flow here. Okay, what are they doing? Yeah, they're trying to make some money. I understand. I always forget that other podcasts have commercials. I forget that sometimes. Not all of them, but yeah. All right. So we're talking over their commercial. We're talking over the commercial. Just ignore this part. Ignore this part. If this wasn't live, this part would be edited out, but oh no, here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Africa Today podcast from the BBC World Service, recorded at 1700 GMT on Wednesday, the 16th of December. I'm Nora Fakeem from the Focus on Africa news desk with the top stories making the news across the continent. In today's podcast, schools in northern Nigeria are ordered to close in a move seen as a response to the abduction of hundreds of students in Katsina State. We'll hear more from our reporter in Abuja. Also coming up, we talk to one of South Africa's top epidemiologists and infectious disease specialists.
All right, there we go. I was trying to get it to pause. Yes, so schools have been closed there because all these people, there's been this major abduction and kidnapping of school children. It's really a horrific, horrible thing. I've been keeping up with what's going on. If you pull up the Africa Today podcast, if you go back, they see on Monday. Yeah, Monday they had a report on Nigeria fears for kidnapped children. Tuesday, they also talked about the abduction of Nigerian schoolboys by a terrorist group. It's an Islamic militant group, to be exact, if you want to know a little bit more about them. And then on Wednesday, they talked about 4 Nigerian states closed schools after abductions. So, yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of students were abducted. And you may not even ever hear about that in the United States of America. You may not even know that's going on. So that gives you a global perspective. Okay, so Africa Today. And again, sometimes they're way behind and when the next episode shows up. So I'll just check throughout the day and see if it shows up. So there's Africa Today. The next one. So remember my morning. My morning is Start Here by ABC News, Up First from NPR, The World and Everything in It. This morning with Gordon Deal, Morning Edition NPR. Then daytime, I transition to Africa Today. And it's usually short, 15, 20 minutes. Then the Global News Podcast from the BBC. The Global News Podcast from the BBC, because I don't want just an American perspective. An American perspective is, just because the America sees things a certain way doesn't mean we're right. Here, I know this is shocking. The America perspective is not always right. Okay, I know we think we are, but we're not. Look, the Christian perspective is not an American perspective. So don't just have an American perspective. The Global News Podcast, BBC, highly recommend that. News Hour from the BBC. All right, so Africa Today, BBC. Global News Podcast, BBC. News Hour, BBC. Now, guess what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to get a global perspective of what's going on in the world. Sky News Daily. That's another one. Sky News Daily. Now, I don't have them written down here. I do. Al Jazeera has a few podcasts that I subscribe to as well. You could look those up, Al Jazeera, and see what podcasts show up. There's a couple of them that I will listen to as well. Again, trying not just to have an American perspective. That limits me. That keeps me blinded. Like that gives me that keeps me from seeing the truth. Sorry, I had to sneeze there. All right. Hopefully that muted. Okay. Hopefully that muted. All right. So Africa Today, Global News Podcast, News Hour, Sky News Daily. So make sure you get them again. Africa Today, Global News Podcast, News Hour, Sky News. Then I subscribe to the World News Roundup. World News Roundup. It may be, you may have trouble finding it World News Roundup comes to us, I think, from CBS News. World News Roundup. It should show up relatively. Let me see. I'm going to go to the Apple Podcast app. That's the one I have open here. See how fast it shows up. Give me 1 second here. Go to World News Roundup. World News Roundup. Here we are. Should show up. Yes, World News Roundup. See, it's loading. Yeah, and this is from today. This is how it sounds. World News Roundup. If it will play. Maybe.
I'm Erin Moriarty.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Maybe. Here we go. Play. Maybe.
Yeah.
It doesn't want to play. Here we go. Let's go to details.
Moriarty of 48 hours.
Wow.
Hours and my weekly podcast, My Life of Crime.
Okay. Okay, first it's got to give us a commercial.
H-E-L-P.
It's got to give us a commercial.
Everyone deserves to be happy.
Hang on.
So many people struggling right now.
All right. Why do podcasts have commercials? All right, here we go.
Never have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. They assess your needs with a few questions.
Now, hang on. Let them get done. Oh, boy. Okay, here we go. Talk. I'm going to need therapy, but because of your commercial, I'm going to send a message to my counselor asking why podcasts have to have commercials. Oh man, come on!
If you want to try a new therapist, it's simple and free to switch.
Here we go.
BetterHelp says they're more affordable than traditional offline.
All right, we're away. Okay, here we go. They're almost done. I'll start living a happier life when you're done with your commercial. Then, okay. No, I don't think I'm going to visit your sponsor. I think I'm going to. Okay, that's good. That's good. All right. All right. Here we go. We're waiting. We're waiting. Here we go. This is called World News Roundup. If it will start. Here we go.
Winter storm buries northeast.
Oh my God, this is crazy. I didn't think it was going to come down this crazy.
Virus cases and deaths hit new daily highs.
We're experiencing an explosive and very deadly surge.
Congress promises relief bill.
We are very close. The American people need more help.
Good morning. I'm Steve Kathan with the CBS World News Roundup.
All right, that's World News Roundup from CBS. That's another one that I listen to during the day. Now, usually, sometimes they get it available early. Sometimes it's a little late. But I don't put it with the morning ones because I think sometimes it shows up a little later. So that's World News Roundup. So I apologize for how long that took to get that to play. But yeah, I probably should just stop doing that because all of them have a commercial at the beginning. I always forget that. All right, so here we go. Daytime. Africa Today, BBC. Global News Podcast, BBC. News Hour, BBC. Sky News Daily. World News Roundup from CBS. Now, when you do a search for World News Roundup, you're going to see that there's two of them. I will explain that in a minute, but go with World News Roundup. Then I look for the podcast called The World. The World, all right? Now, it should show up. I know I'm getting ready to search, which is probably a bad idea, all right? Here we go. I'm going to search for The World. Give me 1 second. It should show up relatively easy. The World. Let me do a search here. The World. I probably have it in my library, but I didn't even bother to look here. So I'm just doing a search to see how it shows up. Okay, yes, it shows up very easy. Just type in The World, and you're going to get The World latest edition from PRX. Now, see, this one shows up later in the day because right now the latest episode they have is from Wednesday. It's the latest episode they have.
Hello, everyone.
Here we go.
Marco Werman here. It has not been an easy 2020 for any of us. Somehow we at The World have managed to keep cranking out a news show about how the entire planet has been challenged by and coping with this historic disease. But behind every broadcast and all the reporting and production that go into it, there's an awareness that you are also trying to do your best to keep your chins up and of those next to you through this adversity. As I record this, we need 450 more people to donate.
Okay, they need money. They need money. All right. So,
when you make a gift of $100 or more,
so they need money. A lot of podcasts ask for money. A lot of podcasts. They ask for money, or they have you want you to give money through their Patreon site, or so a lot of podcasts do that. Aren't you glad that I never ask you for money or give you commercials? Okay. Thank you. All right, here we go. This is what it sounds like.
Support for the world comes from Hintwater, makers of fruit and
Okay, they got to give you they need your money, and they also have sponsors. They have sponsors, and they need your money. Okay. Okay. Here we go. All right, 1 second. Here we go. This is what the world sounds like.
In China, 2 Canadian men have been imprisoned for 2 years. The latest effort to win their release, flood their jail with Christmas cards.
We want to send a message to the Chinese government. These are innocent people being held as collateral.
I'm Marco Werman. Also today, lab-cultured meat on the menu in Singapore.
It doesn't taste better than chicken, and it doesn't taste worse than it. It just tastes like what you would expect.
And in Paris, 14 people convicted today in connection with the Charlie Hebdo attacks. Also from France, we have the story of the immigrant praised for his bravery during that violence.
He took all his courage to do this, to save people.
That's called The World. And again, that's giving you a global perspective. Kind of see what I do in the afternoon. So in the morning, I start with things that are very much more America focused. Start here. That's American news for the most part. Up first, American news for the most part. The world and everything in it. Some global news stories, but still more focused to here in the United States. This morning with Gordon Dill, more here in the United States. Morning edition, NPR, more of the United States. That's the primary focus. Then in the daytime, I immediately switch. I go to Africa Today. Obviously, you can see that's a non-American perspective. Global News Podcast, News Hour, Sky News, World News Roundup. Now, that will throw in America, but it will also throw in some international news. The World, which you just heard, has a more global perspective as well. Okay, now this is what I also subscribe to the following. Now, listen carefully. I'm going to go through these really, really, really quick because these don't require any explanation. These are very straightforward. I subscribe to Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity. Now, all of those are conservative or some, Alex, you could talk over in the conspiratorial world. Now, here's what I do with these. I don't listen to all of it. Typically with Glenn Beck, Alex, Rush, and Sean, I'm going to get pretty much what they're going to be talking about. Rush will talk about a lot of different things. Alex, you're going to know what he's going to be talking about within the first 30 minutes. So I'll listen to Alex just brief, when the first hour drops, because he does like 4 hours. When the first hour drops, I'll immediately just hit play, listen to about 15, 20 minutes and go, okay, that's what he's going to talk about. That's his perspective. Now, if he offers some very unique perspective, I'll be like, ooh, wait, I want to hear what he's citing as his source because I'm going to have to go research that. Now, I listen to Alex with a big question mark. I don't take anything as factual. I just get his perspective, all right? So, Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all right? I also throw in the David Knight Show, which is a part of Alex Jones's network. The War Room, also a part of Alex Jones' network. Now, finding Alex Jones, the David Knight Show, and War Room at times can be very difficult because they are banned from a lot of like a lot of the podcast apps don't want you to find them. But I understand because of their crazy conspiracy theories. I don't like people being censored, but I will. I do listen to them. And again, just briefly, I'm not going to listen to the whole broadcast unless they talk about coming up in 30 minutes. We're going to be dealing with this issue. Then I may skip forward to that 30-minute mark and go, okay, what are they saying? I don't spend a lot of time. I just like to at least know what's going on there. All right. I also subscribe to Apple News Today. Apple News Today. It's the Apple News program. It's relatively short. They kind of give you an overview. Apple News Today. I also subscribe to Axios Today, AXIOS. Axios Today, AXIOS. I also subscribe to Consider This, Consider This. It's from NPR News. And I also subscribe to Coronavirus Fact or Fiction. Coronavirus Fact or Fiction. You can obviously see why I would subscribe to that. Okay. Then I subscribe to All Things Considered from NPR. Now, that is late afternoon. That's late afternoon. Sometimes you don't even get those episodes to around 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. They'll start dropping. And they're gonna drop, like, each episode is like 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It's going to be like 10, 12 episodes. And I'll just go through and go, oh, that's what they're talking about. Oh, that's what they talked about. That's called All Things Considered. Right? Now, all right, I'm almost done. We're at 55 minutes. This is taking forever. All right, here we go. Now, these are the ones I subscribe to for hourly updates. These drop every hour on the hour. NPR Now, every hour on the hour, new episode drop. I get those notifications all the time while I'm on the air. You'll hear that ding, ding. That's me getting notifications that a new episode dropped. NPR Now, every hour on the hour. Fox News Radio Newscast, every hour on the hour. Those are easy to find. The one that's really hard to find is the ABC one. It's like ABC News Update. It's hard to find, but it drops every hour as well. Just for some reason, you don't even get notifications for it. It's really weird. It doesn't work very well, but I do that. Any hourly news podcast I will subscribe to because I like that hourly news update. So that said and they're only like 5 minutes long. So, I can be doing anything. I'm like, oh, I'm getting ready to go to the kitchen to look for a snack. Grab my iPad really quick. Boom. Just hit play while I walk into the kitchen. And then by the time I get back, I may be watching something on television, but I'll hit pause to go to the kitchen. I'll just pick up my iPad and hit play on the hourly newscast. So I at least know what's going on. And if something big is happening, I'll be like, stop what I'm doing. Get in the car, drive back to the church so that I can talk about it. All right. So there's the hourly ones. Now, I also subscribe to, are you ready? World News Tonight from ABC News. World News Tonight. This is my evening time. World News Tonight from ABC. Pbs News Hour. The Pbs News Hour. Now, you can do the Pbs News Hour. You can do this two ways. You can subscribe to Pbs News Hour, the full show, or you can subscribe to Pbs News Hour, the segments. Subscribe to the segments. You'll get the individual stories, like 3-4 minutes and multiple episodes, and you can just look through and see which ones you want to listen to, right? That's where you don't have to listen to the whole thing, all right? Pbs News Hour segments. That's what I do. I subscribe to. World News Roundup late edition. I told you there was a World News Roundup. That's kind of the early edition. Then later at night, they do the World News Roundup late edition, where then they give you a kind of an overview of everything that happened throughout the day. I also subscribe to Rachel Maddow. I know that drives some people crazy. They're like, how dare you? You listen to Rachel Maddow? Are you crazy? Don't do that. No, why? I want her perspective as well. And she's very good at sometimes giving a broader context to a news story. And there are a lot of times I agree with her. There's sometimes I don't, but I want her perspective. Now, to counter Rachel Maddow, I would subscribe to Tucker Carlson, but guess what? It doesn't appear to have a podcast. It doesn't appear to be in podcast form. I think his videos show up on YouTube, but yeah, come on, Tucker Carlson. It's 2020. Get your program in a podcast form. So but you can counter Rachel by checking out what Tucker Carlson had to say if you want to balance that out. Now, when it comes to Christian podcasts, I got to go through these quickly. These are very quick. Breakpoint. That's a 5-minute commentary. That's called Breakpoint. I would definitely subscribe to that. I subscribe to 5 Minutes in Church History. I would definitely recommend you subscribe to that. I also subscribe to, I'm opening up the Edify Christian Podcast app. I also subscribe to Breakpoint. I subscribe to The Briefing with Albert Mohler. The Briefing with Albert Mohler. All right. That one sounds like this. I'll just play this one real quick.
It's Thursday, December 17, 2020. I'm Albert Mohler, and this is The Briefing, a daily analysis of news and events from a Christian worldview. The array of LGBTQ issues is right now one of the most important diagnostic tools in understanding a culture, the worldview of that culture.
There you go. That's The Briefing with Albert Mohler. So I subscribe to Breakpoint. I subscribe to Albert Mohler. I also subscribe to the Christian History Almanac. The Christian History Almanac. The Christian History Almanac. All right? I'll play that for in just a second, what it sounds like. So 5 minutes in church history, Breakpoint, The Briefing with Albert Mohler, the Christian History Almanac, which sounds like this.
It is the 17th of December, 2020. Welcome to the Christian History Almanac, brought to you by 1517 at 1517.org. I'm Dan Van Voris. The year was 1551. On yesterday's show, we were in Romania.
All right, so they give me something about church history. It's relatively quick because as Christians, we need to know church history. We need to. So 5 minutes in church history and the Christian History Almanac. The Christian History Almanac is every day. 5 minutes in church history, sometimes there's these gaps and when you get an episode. I don't like that at all, but yeah, they do that. So there you have those. I also listen to Discover the Word from Our Daily Bread. Discover the Word. It's a 15-minute Bible study. I don't always agree with their theology, but it gives me something to think about and something to consider. I also, let's see, what else would I recommend here? Let's see here. Okay. Issues, etc. I almost forgot them. Issues, etc. That's Issues, ETC. Issues, etc. There's got to be an episode here from Issues, etc. Issues, etc. Let me give you an example of one of their episodes. I'm looking at a bunch of their episodes right now. Let's see here. Let's see. Here's an example of Issues, etc. Here's an example. If I can open it, here we go.
Advent is a time to
reflect.
Wait.
They do commercials too. Okay. Everyone does commercials. Okay, hang on. We'll get past this. I'm trying to hurry. I told you I could not. And please note that what you've heard is not even. We haven't even reached half of what I subscribe to. Not even half. We're not even at the halfway mark. Okay. Literally, I could go 3 hours in just the podcast I listen to. Okay, hang on. Given their commercial. Now here comes Issues, etc. right now.
Abortion is not health care because health care is about healing people, not killing them.
Vice President Biden has a long history of supporting procured abortion. Therefore, he can't approach to receive the sacrament.
All of those old accounts of duties are thought to be repressed, and we must be liberated from them all. And so the needed distinctions between historical figures are all sort of washed away, and they're lumped together as simply guilty as charged.
He is coming again. It is going to happen. Every eye will see him. We can't wait for this moment to arrive. And yet, as we journey toward it, he constantly sustains us by coming to us.
Drivers for Uber and Lyft, listen to Issues, etc. Hey, green means go.
I woke up very early. A couple mornings ago. It all runs together for me. It was early. And as I have fallen into the habit of doing, I began to peruse Twitter without even putting my feet on the floor. And I saw a link to a Washington Post story titled, "Biden Could Redefine What It Means to Be a Catholic in Good Standing." I was intrigued. And I immediately forwarded the link to Jeff, my producer, and said, "This is a must-read."
There you go. Now, the reason I kept playing that because I kind of want to hear. That is an interesting story. Is it going to change what a Catholic in good standing with the church is? That would be that's a big thing to consider. So that's Issues, etc. Issues, etc. So let's go through these again. These are more in the theological, biblical realm. Okay, here we go. 5 Minutes in Church History. Breakpoint Podcast, the Breakpoint Podcast. The Christian History Almanac. The Christian History Almanac. Issues ETC. Issues ETC. That's Issues ETC. Issues ETC. Now, Issues ETC come to you from a Lutheran theological perspective. You need to keep that in mind, right? It comes from a Lutheran theological perspective, but they cover a lot of good information. Issues ETC. Discover the Word. Discover the Word podcast is kind of a 15-minute Bible study like a small group. I don't always agree, but it's okay. The White Horse Inn. I would highly recommend that. Now, sometimes they do a lot of they do like some of the things they do really bothers me now, because now like they'll do like, here's like a 30-minute episode. If you want the full episode, you have to pay or subscribe. And I cannot stand that. Why Christian podcasts do that, I don't know. Give the information out for free. Come on, people. Just let's not use everything as an opportunity to make money. And what I hate is when these theology podcasts say, if you don't support us, we can't be on the air. Why isn't your podcast under the authority of a local church? Your local church should be supporting your podcast efforts. Your local church should. If you're putting out a theology podcast and you're putting out something that is in agreement with your church should use that as a ministry outreach and support you. Okay. And if they don't support you and you're out there running Lone Ranger, why? Be a part of your church. Your church, put it a part of the ministry of the church. I mean, man, if I had a big church and I had a lot of people who did podcasts and their theology was consistent, their perspective was consistent with the church, I would use the money to build a podcast studio in the church and say, come up here and use it 24/7. Here's the key. Let's put some information out. We'll put your podcast episodes on their church website. I mean, I don't understand how people are out there doing theology podcasts separate from the church. I don't get that. Your church should support you. Your church should be using technology to address what's happening in the world from a theological perspective. I don't understand churches who don't do that. Like they can plan every kind of fun, food, and entertainment, but you're not going to use the people. If the people in your church are producing podcasts, use them. Get the young people in the church. I've tried to encourage young people in my church to create a podcast. Use the technology out there and get that Christian worldview out there. So, all right, but I could go further, but I have to stop. When it comes to Christian podcasts, I subscribe to all kinds of different. I subscribe to a lot of lectures that come from seminaries, chapel services that come from seminaries. When it comes to Christian podcasts, I will just subscribe and I just listen. If they're like Bible teaching, what I do is I just try to get the scripture that they're going to cover. And then I usually stop it. I do my own study, and then I go back and hear what they have to say and get their perspective. But we'll have to save that for another time, all right? So there are all the podcasts. I don't have time to repeat all of them. The Christian ones, I will repeat those. 5 Minutes in Church History, Breakpoint, the Christian History Almanac, Discover the Word, Issues ETC, The White Horse Inn. I would tell you to listen to Fighting for the Faith with Chris Roseborough. The problem is, he's kind of focused on YouTube, and I think I subscribed to Fighting for the Faith, but I don't think I've seen a new episode show up in podcast form in like 4 months. Some of the Christian podcasts, I don't get how they think. Like either you can't find their podcast on certain platforms. A good example, One News Now. One News Now. That would be a Christian news podcast I would tell you to subscribe to. The problem is you can't find it on Christian podcast apps. You have to either download their individual app or you have to go to their website. It's 2020, Christians. Get your content on every podcast app on planet Earth. Okay, I don't get it. I don't understand the logic there. But I will subscribe to a lot of Christian podcasts, and we'll have to talk about that in a different episode. I told you I couldn't do it in one episode. I told you. There's just no way. Just remember, you want to get information, but you've got to process all that information. You've got to think about it. And look, not all of these podcasts, I tried it. Like I have a schedule. When I wake up, I try to listen Like on the way here, a lot of times, now sometimes I won't be listening to the podcast. I'll be listening to the radio. Some of these things I subscribe to on the radio. Sometimes right before I get in the car, I'll hit download, hop in the car, boom, hit play. And and some of them I go through relatively quick. I just get the basic idea. And then some I'll stop and go, ooh, that's some information I need. And sometimes, listen, I try to make this a priority. If I hit play and they're offering a perspective that's very different than mine, that to me is a sign that I need to spend more time listening because my perspective is about to be challenged, right? I find it hilarious when people hear me and then they'll email me and they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot. You're a fool. Here, listen to all of this. And typically the stuff they send, I've already listened to. Hey, just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I'm ignorant or an idiot. It may be I just disagree with you. So how about we have a actual discussion about the issues instead of you calling me names, accusing me of not knowing what I'm talking about because I've probably already listened to about 7 hours of podcast about what you're arguing about. But okay, but hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just an idiot. Okay, yeah, I hate them. That's the level of argumentation. So that's what I try to do to give myself to give myself as much information as possible about what's happening in the world so that when I speak about these issues, I do so from a perspective of knowledge, not a perspective of ignorance. And I also try to hear as many different perspectives so that I'm not blinded by my own bias, that I am allowing my perspective to be challenged. And I would challenge you to do the same thing. Now, if you need any clarification, anything, email me. I know this entire episode may be only for one person, but one person asked. So whenever you look, the people who email me, they get the attention. They're the ones who get the podcast episode made specifically for them. Those you don't, you have to put up with everyone else. So some of you are like, why did he waste an hour on what he listens to? Because someone asked. That's why. All right. There you go. And I get an opportunity to share kind of my philosophy. But there you have it. That doesn't even cover. I'm telling you, I don't even think we reached the halfway mark of all the podcasts I subscribe to. And there you have it. It's funny when I go to, I use, what podcast app do I use a lot? It's on this iPad, but it doesn't have all my podcasts on it because I use my my iPad Pro for most of my podcast listening. But it's called Downcast. I use it for my iPad. I really like Downcast, but it's funny when I pull down to update all the podcast feeds, it takes forever. I just sit there like, okay, and it'll be like, you've got 900 listened to episodes, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot. I was showing someone at the church one time one of the podcast apps that I was using. I was showing them, it had a little notification of all the new episodes, and it was like 1,357. I'm like, those are all for today. I'm way behind. So yeah, I have put it this way. I want all that information available. I may not get to all of it every day because I do a lot of other things. I don't just listen to podcasts. So some days I go 3-4 days and I may not even get to anything, but the information is right there at my fingertips. So I can access it whenever. I'll go right there. And you say, which podcast apps do you use? Obviously, I use Spreaker because we're on there. So in our live broadcast, that's how people listen to us. I use Downcast? I use Pocket Cast. I use Apple Podcast. I have multiple ones. And sometimes I use multiple ones just to see which one I like the best. But let me know. Here's how we'll end this. Let me know what podcast you listen to. Send me your list, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Send me your list, right? I've given you mine. Send me yours. Give me your philosophy of what you listen to. Tell me how you approach it. And tell me which podcast apps you listen or which podcast you use, if I can speak correct this morning. But here's the thing I have to know. You've got to do this. If you're going to tell me which podcast you listen to, what should be the top of your list? It better be Theology Central, the VBC podcast, the VBC Bible Institute podcast, because if anything else is on the top of your list, I'm sorry, our friendship is over. I'm sorry. And you know what? Can I even trust you if Theology Central, VBC, and VBC Bible Institute is not your number one listened to podcast? I mean, are you even a trustworthy person? I mean, your whole character should be called into question. All right, there. Yeah, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. Great day. Thanks for listening. I'll be back probably with one more live broadcast, but I wanted to get this out of the way. So thank you to the person who asked the question. I did the best I could. Hopefully it was satisfactory. Everyone have a great day. God bless.